This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29.
Okay, I'll declare the meeting open. Just so everyone is aware, in the room today, along with myself, I have Andy Allen and Fran McCann. And at present on Stardate, we have the Vice Chair Kelly Armstrong, we've got Sinead Innes, and we've got Mark Durkin. So I'll move then on to item number 1, which is apologies. At this stage, I don't have any apologies, albeit I know we have a couple missing, but hopefully they'll be able to join us at some stage. Moving on then to agenda item number 2, which is chairperson's business. Can I just remind members, I was just going to remind members about the social distancing in this room and the need for members to come in via Starleaf where possible. So can I thank those members today that are giving Starleaf a go, because it certainly will help us. And I just want to mention to you that whenever we start the clause by clause of the pension schemes bill and also the licensing bill as well, we will have departmental officials will want to come into the room to do that. So we will play that by ear whenever that happens, but I just would remind members whenever we do have officials in the room, it is a bit tight. I'd rather have volunteers than have to do conscripts. So I think if we can sort that out between ourselves, that would be the best thing. Any members want to make any comment on that, or are they happy enough to move on? Happy enough? Okay, thank you. Also then, just to remind members that we agreed to take part in effective questioning. The workshop will last around 1 hour and be done via Starleaf, and that will be, that's today, isn't it, as well? No, when's that one? Sorry.
The 19th.
The 19th, sorry, I see that here. That's the 19th of November, so that one is a little while away. So members, are they content that this is arranged for the meeting at the end of the 19th of November? Yep, all agreed? Good stuff. And also members, the earliest available afternoon date for the first agreed stakeholder briefing session will be Tuesday the 24th of November. So are the committee happy that we move ahead and get that sorted out Committee happy with that? 24th of November? Yep. Great, thank you. And also then, just to let you know that I'll be making a speech on Tuesday in plenary in connection with the second stage of the budget bill, highlighting the various areas of committee concern based on issues raised at a recent session with the departmental officials and other evidence sessions. Can I also remind members that following the meeting today, there will be a short training session with Claire McCanney from the Bills Office, and members received an email yesterday including supporting materials. Okay, we'll move on then to agenda item 3, which is the draft minutes. Draft minutes of the 8th of October 2020 are page 6 of your pack. Are members content to note the draft minutes? All content? Great, thank you. Then we'll move on to agenda item 4, which is matters arising. Members, you've been provided a page 12 of the ministerial reply on the Sports Hardship Fund. Can I ask our members content with that or any comments?
Agreed.
Agreed, content, thank you. Members, you've also been provided a page 13 with a written update on the areas of committee interest which the Minister covered in her briefing at the meeting on the 30th of September. The areas covered in the written update are the sub-regional stadia and regional stadia programme, the Sign Language Act, the Health Transformation Project and extensions of existing health assessment services contracts, the Charity Commission and the court ruling on the legal definition of terminal illness when claiming benefits. Again, can I ask members, are they content to note, or does anyone want to make any comment on that?
Agreed.
Content? Yep, okay, thank you. Then members, at the meeting of the 8th of October, members asked about the department's responsibility over inland waterways. I think this might have been you, Kelly, raised this. The department has advised that inland waterways are not the responsibility of the Department of Communities, but the Department of Infrastructure. During the reorganisation of departments, DFI inherited responsibility for inland waterways from the Department of Culture, Arts and Leisure. So I don't know if anybody wants to make any comment on that, or we'll just note that. I don't know why it was in the, for us, or was it last week, the week before, for our information? Yeah. But, so just content to note, yes? Mm-hmm. Great, good stuff. Okay, bear with me, just some more stuff. Oh no, that's it. That's it for that part of the agenda. Okay, members, we're going to move on then to agenda item number 5, which is the Northern Ireland Football League briefing on the impact of COVID-19 on local football. Members, the paper for this agenda item is at page 18 of your meeting pack. And can I welcome to the meeting Gerard Lawler, Interim NIFL Board Chairman, Andrew Johnston, Managing Director, and Stephen Mills, Development Manager. These are all very welcome to the meeting today.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Can I ask then, is it yourself, Gerard, are you going to give us a briefing?
I'll start off the briefing, Chair, if that's okay. And Andrew, we note a number of different...
Gerard, sorry to interrupt on you, Gerard. Your volume for us is very, very low. I don't know why that would be. I don't know whether it's our end or your end. So you might have to shout, actually, in order for us to hear you. That's okay.
That's fine. I'm good at that sometimes. So hang on. Hopefully that's a little better for you, Chair, is it?
Just let me check with other members. I can hear it. Other members, are you okay? And are you okay?
Just about, Chair.
Just about. As loud as you can, Gerard, if you can, that would help us out greatly.
Okay, no
Pretend you're on
problem.
the football pitch.
Oh. Chair, firstly, and members, thank you for inviting us and my colleagues today. As you say, I am the acting chair of the Northern Ireland Football League, and with me today is our MD, Andy Johnston, and our development manager, Stephen Mills. I will also make you aware that I am the chairman also of Cliftonville Football Club, but I speak to you today to represent our 38 member clubs, male and female football. These clubs are community institutions in the heartbeat of many a local community, be it from North or East Belfast, County Down or Antrim, North West or North East. Formed, and again, Chair, just to give you some background on where we sit in the football family, we were formed in 2013 through an article change at the Irish FA. and it was a development of a relationship of clubs and supporters and some commercial partners for the league to commence. And we run what we believe to be an open and transparent organisation, which is driven a more vibrant and hopefully, we'd like to think, a professional approach to domestic football within the country. NIFL for us is everything that is good about this part of our world, bringing clubs and communities together, forming understanding and delivering for our clubs that are community institutions, driven and backed by thousands of volunteers, providing a pathway to make young people's dreams become reality. Our core principles and objectives all revolve around the support and protection of our clubs. And I believe our first slogan on our formation stands us proud today. There is no prawn sandwiches within NIFL. The Northern Ireland Football League is an organising body, as I say, of the Danske Bank Premiership, the Northern Ireland Championship, and the Premier Intermediate and Associated Academy Leagues. We're a private company. We have 38 members, and each is a stakeholder in that company, and we are responsible for the administration and organisation, as I say, of league football. Since 2013 and until the pandemic, we have witnessed a resurgence of Irish league football in attendances, growing year on year. And over the next 5 to 10 minutes, we are keen to give your members a respectful insight into some of the major concerns and challenges our clubs face as a result of the pandemic. We understand members are also keen to understand the very difficult and painstaking process we had to adopt to complete the 2019-20 season, and we will attempt to cover those points for you if time permits, and we will also be very open to any questions you have, Chair. So if I can hand over now, please, to Andrew Johnston, our Managing Director. He will discuss the closure of last season.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jared, and thanks, Chair. As Jared has said, I'll attempt now to give members a high-level overview of the curtailment of the 2019-20 season. As we're all aware, in mid-March, a pandemic hit that has had a lasting impact on us all, and in football terms, the IFA announced the suspension of football due to COVID. As a result, on the 18th of March, the NIFL board established a COVID steering group to assess the impact and consider future options for all NIFL leagues. Throughout the next couple of months, and in consultation with clubs, there was continued commitment to fully complete the 19-20 seasons if conditions allowed under the principles of health, finance and sporting integrity. During this period, the steering group continued to fully appraise all season end options, and on the 9th of June, with conditions making full completion impossible, presented recommended season end options to clubs. With conditions not allowing an earlier start, UEFA club competition deadlines and the official end date of the football season approaching, the steering group recommended that the Premiership clubs return to play a further 2 games to get to a position where each team had played each other 3 times, which is where the traditional season would end before we split for the final 5 fixtures. The alternative was to curtail the season with immediate effect and use a mathematical model to determine league positions. At Championship and Premier Intermediate League level, it is viewed that an immediate curtailment was the only feasible option due to the standard being viewed as non-elite in consultation with the Department of Communities and the Irish Football Association. As a result of the steering group recommendations, Premiership clubs requested more time to develop alternative options, but ultimately an alternative option was not progressed. Following this, the Premiership clubs then agreed to the immediate curtailment, and on the 26th of June, the NIFL board confirmed the immediate curtailment of the season. The NIFL board also agreed to appoint an independent third party to recommend the fairest and most equitable model to determine final league placings in all leagues. In purely football administration terms, and I know you and your colleagues have so many dilemmas and difficult decisions and difficult conversations to have, They have, but in a football administration level, COVID has presented unprecedented challenges to NIFL and to our member clubs. While two clubs appealed the NIFL board decision around the curtailment of the season, these decisions have subsequently been found as being made in a fair and reasonable manner through an independent appeals process. That's, as I say, is a very high-level overview, and I'll pass back over to Jared to discuss, I suppose, what is our current and future concerns.
Thank you, Andy. Chair, as with many industries, the professional sports industry in Northern Ireland is facing huge financial challenges in a direct consequence of COVID. NIFL clubs not only play a vital role in the community, as I've said, but as a collective, we are the largest sports employer in Northern Ireland, with around 300 professional players, plus part-time coaches, administrators, hospitality and support personnel. Both our role in the community and in the local economy, we feel, is underappreciated and undervalued. In August 2020, the NIFL board established a task force to examine the impact of COVID on our clubs and explore the best way to support the member clubs. The main result of the work of that task force is an in-depth report, which I believe members have, and I will summarise briefly for you. As originally the second largest league in the world, the report is a reflection of a league at risk. Under normal circumstances, NIFL is a well-established and financially stable group of professional football clubs that have worked very hard to get there over the last number of years. In fact, with a combined turnover in the 2019 Premiership alone of around 11 million, our clubs support the local economy. We acknowledge and are thankful to all the government support financially that we have received to date, and we have received the hospitality, tourism and retail sectors grant scheme. 11 of our clubs received that. We have been benefactors of the job retention scheme. And up to now, Chair, that has kept our clubs going and it has kept us afloat. We have also received some money from FIFA that was administered to us through the IFA. They distribute money through the governing body and the National Association. But without further support, senior football in Northern Ireland as we know it, we feel as if, to be truthful, we're suffocating and ultimately will die. All our clubs have demonstrated to the league significant cost savings, a reduction in club budgets. Clubs have borrowed money, and we have did everything that we can to try and help ourselves because, to be honest, we understand the pressure of government and of the executive. But now with ongoing employment commitments, running costs, and we also feel that we have a responsibility to the local community and the benefits and mindfare that we bring to that local health and mind well-being of that community. We are starting this weekend, and also thankful that as a league we are still able to contain some crowds, and that will bring in some revenue. But if we could just look at gate receipts alone to give you some examples, sure. Gate receipts in 2019 were equivalent of 2.1 million to the Premiership clubs. Under current restrictions, an estimated 85% reduction on crowds would see our clubs looking at a 1.8 million reduction. And even with this greatly reduced attendance figures, there are fears the clubs will end up having to play behind closed doors for the greater good of our community. And clubs are wary of the pressures, as I say, the departments have to make. The 2019 figures are based on audited accounts, but the report that we commissioned, we also asked our clubs to look at what measures they've in place and include other reductions that they would face. And they're also reporting significant reduction in sponsorship, advertising, hospitality revenues, and at their current capacity, it has established a loss for the clubs of 3.2 million. The report recognises NIFL clubs outside the Premiership in our Championship, our Premier Intermediate League, and our Women's Premiership also have significant contributors to the sporting landscape as well as local communities. In closing, we have all probably seen the reports of similar challenges in bigger leagues in the UK, and we hope the right targeted support our clubs can remain in business. While some clubs may have availed of some of the fundings from Sport NI's Hardship Fund, we look in envy for survival packages such as 70 million from the Irish Government for sport, 40 million euros which was directly to solvency and continued existence of the GAA, of rugby and of football, or the £195 million package for sport in England and the English government's package to save the National Football League in England. Sure, we know we are not alone in needing help, and some fantastic work has already been done by this committee and by the department in other sectors. For example, we applaud the support for the arts sector in recent months that's been received. But our report is a plea which has gone to relevant ministers, and we ask this committee and the executive to continue, please, to develop a much needed emergency survival fund for NIFL clubs that safeguard the local football industry and the future of Northern Ireland's leading football clubs. Sure, I'd like to thank you for your time, for your own and the members, and we're happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for your briefing, and I mean, I'll not pretend that I know everything about football. I certainly don't. But I've two meals in my life with my son and my partner that absolutely love it and love going to their Saturday league games and everything else. And I know the importance that plays in so many people's lives, and I know the importance it plays for their mental health and for social health as well. Just how important it is. So I just want to ask you a couple of questions before I open it up to members. You'd mentioned there that a lot of the clubs had used the furlough scheme, which I'm sure was of great benefit to you. Can you, or do you see a way of using the new job retention scheme? And can I also ask you as well, what level of discussions have you had with the IFA and the Department of Communities in relation to financial assistance?
Okay, first of all, yes, we did use the furlough scheme. Luckily, the furlough scheme came at a time when we weren't playing, Chair. Unfortunately, now our clubs are coming back and we are back playing and training and being active. So that takes us out of large proportions of the new job scheme and almost excludes us. So unfortunately, that is a major factor to us at this moment in time. So our costs are rising and our revenue is decreasing. In relation to the Irish FA, we have brought our report to the IFA, who are the governing body. They tell us they will make representations to relevant bodies. Unfortunately, we as a league don't receive the millions that's received from UEFA and FIFA directly that they would receive. And we have had correspondence with the department. And I must say the department staff have been very helpful around operational needs and allowing us to get back playing this weekend. And as I say, getting crowds into ground. So there is communication, but as yet we've had no direct outcome or positivities around funding. Sure.
Thanks, Jared. And just on that issue around fans in grounds, do you think that there's more that could be done to allow that to be increased in any way to help with that that revenue?
Sure, I think we must be responsible as clubs, and it's something that I'm very wary of. For us to push for crowds and increasing crowds into grounds could almost be on the borderline of irresponsible in the current pandemic. So I think it would be irresponsible of us to put pressure on the department or on the minister to try to put people into grounds in current climate. Our grounds, we are social distancing, we are 2 metres apart, and I don't really see how it could develop any further under current circumstances. And as I say, we are grateful for what we have at the moment, and ultimately we fear but understand the day may not be too far away where officials have to make some decisions to take those crowds out. Hopefully not, but possibility we're prepared for that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open up to members. I have Fra, and I have Robin, and I have Sinead. So, Fra.
Guys, thank you very much for the presentation. It's certainly interesting, and someone that would follow soccer week in, week out, mostly on television now. But I do commend your attitude in terms of crowds gathering again in different stadiums, and I think that's good. But Jared, and it's always difficult for clubs, especially local clubs, to survive. But extra difficulties in the present circumstances obviously makes it more difficult. And I was just going over the written presentation that you provided, and I see from the committee what would be your expectations of us. Obviously, we can lobby the department and whoever else, but what is your expectations beyond that for us?
Ultimately, Fra, thank you. We would be requesting of the committee to lobby the minister or the executive that there's a sports hardship fund set up to allow clubs to continue to provide the benefits we provide and succeed in the current pandemic. Unfortunately, and I know there's a lot of demand on public funds, but we don't see any other way, unfortunately, unless there's some sort of external funds provided to our clubs. We would see between 6 to 8 clubs possibly going out of business in around Christmas in the first quarter of next year.
Thank you very, very much. And I know that where I live, there are quite a number of young clubs, like say Macalado, Willowbank, St James's Swifts, and things like that, who obviously play a big part in local football. And obviously their aspirations is to move on from there and the other echelons of the thing. Is there any connections with them at grassroots to see how that's faring in the present circumstances? And when you're asking of the minister or the department, do they be taken into consideration, or do they have to shout their own corner?
Ultimately, I mean, so those clubs would fall under really the auspice of the IFA as their different leagues. But as senior clubs in the country, we have a responsibility to all those clubs. A number of the clubs that you've mentioned, I was actually speaking to and in contact yesterday around, giving some support, and they were asking some questions. St James's Swift's the club that my own club has a link with and a very close connection. So I think we have a responsibility as senior clubs to help them, but their plea would come through their leagues and really be the responsibility of the IFA.
Sure, and just one final question. And I know that you had said that if help is not forthcoming, it could have serious consequences for a number of clubs. How long could you survive without it? And I think that's an important element of it. And obviously the committee, I think it would be in full support of what you're asking us here. But what sort of time frame? Because sometimes if a club goes under, the most difficult thing in the world is to get them back in again.
Brad, basically the report and the correspondence we've had with clubs indicates around Christmas and the first quarter of next year is really when clubs would really start to hit a brick wall and face financial problems.
Thank you very much for that.
Brad, just to follow that up, sorry, the loss of social clubs and hospitality yesterday, will have a further impact, but that's what the report contains.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Fra. Robin?
Thank you, Chair, and thank Mr. Lawler and his team for coming today. Chair, my daughter-in-law is an office holder with Niffle Women's League. Do I have to declare that as an interest? I do.
Maybe better too.
I've declared it as an interest now.
Should take it off to you, Rob.
No, she's more talented than I am. Can I just ask, I don't think I need to ask any questions. I think the report is an excellent report. I think it lays out the problems very, very clearly, and indeed lays out the value of the clubs to not just to sport, but to the whole, every aspect of life in Northern Ireland, including in many ways, Chair, the health aspects of the population, both physical and mental health. I did get the impression when we raised issues with the Minister that indeed the Minister was sympathetic. So really all I would say, I think the recommendation at the end of the report really is where I would sort of concentrate my remarks only to say, certainly I would want to be supportive of that recommendation, the development of an emergency survival fund for the Niffle clubs, just to withstand this impact of COVID-19 and indeed to safeguard local football for the future, Chair. I don't think I have any direct questions. Excellent report, easily read, and gets to all the issues.
No.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you. I have now Sinead, then Mark, then Kelly. So Sinead.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
And indeed, go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, thanks to Jared and Andrew and Stephen for the presentation today, and like Robin said, for the report as well. It's very, very comprehensive. I definitely appreciate your presence here today and coming before the committee. I want to say as well, I fully recognise the role that the Niffle clubs have played throughout the COVID pandemic. As Jared said, they're very often they're the heartbeat, they're the hub of the community. So I want to recognise that role and just say thanks for the effort over the last few months. Jared outlined the huge difficulties being faced by the clubs, and I suppose being honest, I know the guys will appreciate this. For some, the difficulties and the pressures will be felt more acutely than others. For instance, there's some clubs will receive greater financial backing just because they have investors, and some of those clubs as well, on top of having those investors, will also have access to European funding because of their success. So there's that to consider as well. I suppose the paper majors heavily on gate receipts, which is the main issue, obviously, but I think there is a concern around commercial support as well. For some clubs, that's completely disappeared. It's non-existent, and that's just part of the wider COVID problem. George, you said yourself, you're going out, you're asking businesses and investors to back the club, and the financial firepower is simply not there because of the COVID pandemic and the times that we're living in. So perhaps that needs to be considered more fully, in the round, taking into consideration that aspect of it as well. I suppose, and the chair alluded to it as well, the IFA being the governing body, and I know Georgie said those talks are still ongoing and they haven't come to fruition yet, and you can't really go into much detail on it, but the IFA being the governing body really has a big role to play here as well, I feel, because as Jared said at the start, your mission statement is the protection of clubs, and I don't think the IFA should be contemplate. I'm not saying they are, but I think because the paper alludes to the fact that some clubs are very close to going out of business, going bust, and I think at all costs that should not be allowed to happen. And I think in the first instance the responsibility for that falls to the IFA, to the governing body. So whatever they have up their sleeve, whatever money they have access to, that should be front and centre, and I hope that that's the line that the IFA are taking, and I'm sure you guys as the Niffle board will hold their feet to the fire on that, and we'd support you in doing that. That's not to say that we don't agree with the fact that yourselves, the club, the sport, needs a government intervention. I think a lot of sporting codes are in the same scenario, and it's only right that we look at how we support those, because we know the huge role that sport plays, community benefits that the NIFL clubs pay as well. So, I mean, we have to protect that, we have to promote that, and we have to make sure that's not lost. So if that means that we need to come up with some financial intervention, then I hope that's what ministers are considering. So I suppose I don't know if there's any questions in that really, but we were saying in the paper as well about clubs being in jeopardy. How many are we talking? Do we have a figure, or are we just, is it a general sort of analysis that, if we don't get a financial intervention that we will see some, but I'm just wondering, is there a figure on that? But if there's not, I understand that's...
Sinead, probably thank you for your comments and the help and support that you have always provided to the league. It is appreciated. Probably, Sinead, everyone's at risk, and even just to make members aware, as you say, there's stuff around European leagues, and Europeans and our clubs did so well in Europe. We are thankful, and I must praise a number of our clubs that actually have engaged with the league. The NIFL board have set up a COVID fund that you'll see in the paper, that we have put basically the board have put their life savings into, and we've looked for other bodies. Thankfully, a number of our European clubs, the majority of them actually, have come forward and want to open discussions with us to put money into that pot themselves. So I think it shows the camaraderie around the league, and hopefully demonstrates to yourselves we're doing everything we can to help ourselves. To answer your direct question, Sinead, it's, there's some clubs of investment, there's some clubs, but we would have major concerns probably around 8 to 10 clubs out of the 12 senior clubs. And we don't mean to harp on about senior clubs. Obviously, they're at the most greater risk. And I look at a club, the pathway for NIFL, I look at, the senior club in your own constituency is only 38 years old and are now one of the leading clubs in the country. And we want to continue to provide that. And a club like that has did so much for the community and developed. I mean, my own club is the oldest club in Ireland. I've no harm in putting my hands up to say Cliftonville, seen as a bigger club, are at financial risk also. So, Sinead, we would have concerns around 10 to answer your question, and if not 12 of those senior clubs, and then going into Championship and PIL, which gate common revenue is their only form of income.
Yeah, apologies, Sue Chair and Sinead. Just to pick up on Ger's point, we actually had meetings with the Championship and Premier Intermediate League clubs last night, because obviously with yesterday's announcement, those divisions will be deemed as non-elite, and they're looking at a further period where they won't play. And we had meetings with those clubs, and as inevitably happens, you then get phone calls after the meetings about issues people didn't want to speak about in an open forum. And one club at PIL level, which is the third tier in Northern Ireland, highlighted that they were down, before they even started, they were down in around £10,000 on commercial income. So just going back to your point around gate receipts is a huge issue, but the long-term commercial sponsorship income, hospitality income, is also going to have a big impact. And for a club at that level, 10,000 will be a significant hit for them. And that was basically through pitch advertising, going to local businesses who do, in full credit to the club, they don't feel comfortable approaching businesses at this time. But it goes to further show the issue. And again, going to the club in your constituency and speaking to them, I know commercial income is something that is going to be a challenge and something that they've excelled at in recent years. So that will be a concern for them moving forward too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sinead. Mark?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, men, for that presentation, a very thorough presentation and a very frightening presentation. Sadly, some stark figures in there that gives us food for thought, and I think certainly emphasises a need for urgent action if we're to, save the league, but you're not going to, there's no point saving the league if you can't save the teams in it, and vice versa. I had been going to raise an issue, although you've touched on it already, and it was around the curtailment of last season, there was a bit of disquiet up in my constituency in terms of the impact on Institute when it was deemed through the formula that they should be relegated, even though they were only 3 points off safety with 7 games left, including 5 home fixtures. But that's gone to appeal and been unsuccessful, so we'll have to leave it at that. Obviously, the challenges facing clubs are huge. The challenges facing yourselves in IFA are huge, so it's imperative that we look at how we get assistance to those grassroots clubs. You mentioned there the support that had come from FIFA. I was just wondering maybe if we could get a wee bit more detail on that, and do you know how much came in and then how it was filtered out sort of to the clubs and across the organisation. There's also, and I think it was Sinead made the point there about the differences between clubs. You know, some will have been able to avail of different financial supports, you know, but a lot of the clubs won't own their own grounds, so therefore wouldn't have been able to benefit or avail of any of the rates-based grants the government provided. So have you done any kind of analysis of that either?
Jared, if you'd like me to come in.
Yes, please, Stephen.
Again, thank you, Mark, for those questions. Specifically on the COVID funding, each of the Premiership clubs received £21,000 worth of support through FIFA COVID recovery. Our Championship clubs just shy of £8,000, and our Premier Intermediate League clubs £2,000. So that was the money directly from FIFA channeled through the IFA into our clubs.
And did all the money that came from FIFA go to the clubs, or was some retained within IFA for organisational or for the international setup?
Possibly Jared could help me out with that in his IFA experience.
Thanks, David. There's nothing like throwing somebody under a bus. It would be my understanding, Mark, that the National Association held back 20% of that funding from FIFA for some of their operational needs.
Okay.
And Mark, if you want to go back to some of the additional funds, I'm aware of a very small number of clubs who would have received the Sport and I hardship grant, which would have been £2,000, but only a very small number. That was really first past the post, not means tested. In terms of the larger hospitality grant, there are 11 clubs out of our 38 club membership who received the £25,000 grant, and a couple who had received the 10,000 smaller grant in relation to that. As you mentioned, some of our clubs don't own their own grounds, so the access to the rates relief was quite varied. But in the Premiership, 12 clubs alone, around 6 or 7 would have or currently avail of that rates relief, which is a deferment as opposed to a genuine saving. And I suppose, as already mentioned in the presentation, really that the life saviour has been the furlough scheme, and up to date, that's been a value of around £1.5 million. But the fear is that has saved us to date, but we move forward now with no furlough. That are genuinely out there now. If you look at the report, there's around £5 million worth of payroll salary going out from NIFL clubs per year, and we take furlough and the ability to try and manage yourself through this. It's quite stark and scary.
It's something that I hadn't properly considered around football clubs, the whole furlough issue. But would that make, I suppose, it more difficult for some of the smaller clubs to retain players who even are on contracts? Do you know? I know they're always vulnerable to the bigger boys coming in and buying or taking their best players, but would that increase their vulnerability?
To a certain degree, they're protected in that the transfer window is currently closed, but they're protected in that regard. But they also have the liabilities of the cost having to be met, and it's something that we have probably been guilty of overlooking ourselves around
the importance and the status of the Irish League in terms of professional sport in Northern Ireland. We are one of very few that have a professional setup in terms of salary elite athletes. There's really only our Irish League clubs alongside Ulster Rugby and the Belfast Giants, but slightly different models in how they operate. So I think it's something that has been underappreciated and under-recognised even by ourselves who live and breathe the sport. We've just got on with it and not recognising the value of it.
And see, as regards the threat looming over the league, you spoke there of the huge, I suppose, downturn in terms of gate receipts, but also in terms of sponsorship. It's just, I'm going to drag you into a debate we were having a couple of weeks ago, and we will have another day. We're currently looking at gambling legislation to come before the Assembly, and there'd been some discussion around, perhaps the prohibition of gambling firms being allowed to sponsor sporting teams or sporting events. Should such, now don't panic, it's not in there yet, but should such a decision be taken or something like that put in legislation here? Now I'd raised the point, I thought it could have pretty dire consequences for the likes of yourselves. Would you have a view on that?
Andy, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll take that. I mean, ultimately, Mark, thanks. Our League Cup, which we have just under a calendar pressure this year, we have agreed to defer any decision on it. But our sponsor of the League Cup is a bookmaker. But I also look around the league, Mark, and I think a third of the league at Premiership level, their main sponsor, or shirt sponsor, is a gambling firm. So at a time when there is a difficulty around commercial income, that would ultimately, that would be a further blow, albeit recognising maybe the consideration that you have to take into account as well. But just putting it in simple terms, that would be, I think, a third of the current Premiership impacted.
Okay, thank you. And just finally, if you'll indulge me, obviously, the Irish League is in difficulty. The NIFL has major problems. They aren't exclusive to your organisations. The League of Ireland has quite a lot of headaches too. And I know we're in the midst of a pandemic, and there's an awful lot of going on and a lot of plates spinning. But do you think, or what would the view of the organisation be about this perhaps precipitating the move towards an All-Ireland League? I know now the Premiership clubs, maybe with the exception of yours, Chair, had signed a letter a few months back to the FAI asking them to explore the option of an All-Ireland League. But is there a sort of corporate view on that, or how you think that might progress, and how to the benefit of clubs here and the game across the island?
Mark, I suppose, look, we will always do what's best for the game and for our clubs. And just as an example, and this isn't about, just I didn't support, we're not against the idea of it. It was the actual, I didn't agree with the way the proposal was going as such.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was in the best interest of my club. So look, we will always explore every opportunity that is in the best interest of football and of the community and of the clubs. And if something prevails someday that's in the best interest and it's what our member clubs want, then we will ultimately support it.
Okay, no, thank you, man. Thanks, and we'll do everything we can to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Can I bring in Kelly, please?
Hello, Chair. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I don't envy you at the moment. It's a very difficult time for all of you. So thank you very much for all that you're doing. I just wanted to check with you, in your paper that you've provided for us, you've provided options, of how much money that you think that could be required that would help you get through. And I've noticed that there's, obviously it goes from do nothing, which is currently the state of affairs, right through to, I see option D is loss of fund of loss of gate receipts and other associated projected losses, and that would be for all clubs. The amount there is just over £3.5 million. I'm just wondering, it's been mentioned by others before, if the Minister is successful in making a bid, and we know that the Minister has tried to make a bid for all sports, and in the last round that wasn't necessarily successful. If she's going for this bid and it's not the all singing, all dancing, not option B or option D, sorry, if it was more like option C, what would that actually mean? That's for the non-ACC clubs. Does that 8 to 10 that you've identified as being in trouble, does that cover all of them or some of them?
Kelly, thanks for the question. We would say it would go a long way to protecting the majority of them, if not all.
Thank you. The other thing I wanted to check, going back to the questions about the commercial sponsorship, absolutely. It's horrendous out there for everyone, and I can imagine your sponsors who have been fantastic support over the years are finding it extremely tough at the moment. I'm just wondering if there's conversations with those commercial sponsors that are they intending, hopefully, if COVID stops and things start to get back to normal in the next financial year, are they intending to come back to you again, or is that just completely off the table at this stage?
The indications that we have got is that they're sympathetic. They're not giving us any direction. They're not giving clear answers. It's very much, look, at the moment, we're sorry. I mean, to give you some statistics and using a live example, I think as Andy says, one club who are very good at this, some clubs are good at it, Kelly, and some aren't, if I'm honest, depending on the area that you live in. But clubs are probably struggling to get around 10 to 15% of commercial income at the moment. And it's just how things are. We just don't know, but the indications are a lot more negative than positive.
Yeah, not to sort of harp on about this negativity, but we know that the lockdown period and the inability to get out there and to develop youngsters is having a big impact on sports across the board. I'm just wondering, so the short term, we have the financial implications for yourselves, but in the long term, have you anything that you can tell us about the impact that this delay for almost a full year now is having on the development of young players coming through, and what impact that may have on the sport, in the medium to longer term?
Stephen, you're probably better. Or Andy?
No, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. It is a major concern. One of my areas of responsibility is around youth development within NIFL clubs, and unfortunately, morning we will have to announce that we will be standing down our academy league structure, much to the disappointment and dismay to a lot of clubs and their committed coaches and obviously the players. It is a worry as a father of 2 young sons who are under the age of academy level football, but avid players. They trained last night at a club where certainly there has been no evidence of one of the largest youth clubs in Northern Ireland, and there has been zero contact transmission. But the reality, both from a mental and a physical health point of view, is quite worrying, as members will be totally aware of. The loss of opportunity for these young people, both from a social point of view, but from our own elite platform and pathway, it is removing an opportunity for them potentially to make a career in the sport. And which is quite worrying for all of us.
And has there been anything from IFA or FIFA about that? Because that's bound to be happening across the whole sport. This is a global pandemic. I'm just wondering if they are aware of the issues. They're bound to be. And have they any plans at all to help local development, youth development?
I think it's very difficult to speak on behalf of the IFA in that regards. I know that they are working and looking at all options, but with all this, we remain respectful to the reality in the health pandemic and the state that we're in. So every decision that we are making, and every plea we're trying to make is always kind of caveat: health must come first, but health can also be supported and encouraged through responsible, sensible return to sport.
Kelly, apologies. I mean, again, it's maybe useful to provide a wee bit of an update from again discussions with clubs at Championship and PIL level, or second and third tier last night, who, whilst they're not young people as in teenagers, they're young men, they're young adults, and this will be the same within the Women's Premiership as well. But the fear from some of the clubs last night was a further delay, which is necessary for the next 4 weeks, will actually impact them as clubs, in that young men will have decided that maybe they don't fancy starting a league season in the middle of the winter, or they've picked up another pastime, or they're starting, because of the difficulties around work, they're starting to work on Saturdays, etc. And we actually had a very interesting and useful meeting with Sport NI a couple of weeks ago, who gave us some information on data they had obtained and collated around the impact of COVID on sports participation, but also sports volunteers. And whilst we're talking about our clubs as small businesses, we rely heavily on volunteers and the volunteer ethos. And if those people have been pulled away from that normal routine and that normal commitment, that is also a big concern for football and sport in general, in terms of getting back on our feet.
Thank you very much. Just finally, I know that we were all disappointed whenever we saw the money coming forward. That, well, thankfully the arts got the allocation, but sports didn't. Earlier you talked about the money that was available, and we know that the money that came out of Sport NI was first come, first served. If there was money available, if the Minister was able to secure extra money for yourselves and other sports, do you want that first come, first served to continue, or would you rather that there was a means testing so that those clubs that are in under the most pressure would get first dibs, as they, What do you think about that?
Jared, if you're happy for me just to come in again. Kelly, just in terms of the report that we have offered you, we've attempted to be very honest and accurate, and that's why we used the gate receipts based on audited accounts alongside projected costs, which maybe can't be just quantified to date. But very much we would be supportive of a means tested method, and that's why in the report we based it nearly like a business case, where there are options there that identified the whole need, but we're also mindful there may be clubs who could withstand the impact for a little bit longer. It's not to say that they won't have needs moving forward, but on the whole, I'm confident to say that NIFL would support a means tested one too, because we want to get out to the end of this with 38 clubs.
No, thank you very much, folks. I think, to be honest, I'm completely supportive. I am disappointed so far that we haven't had more money for you, but I think we have a minister who gets it. I think we have a minister who understands and is making bids, and we will support her, of course, in that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. No other member has indicated they want to speak. Can I thank all three of you for coming and briefing today? I always enjoy a briefing where I learn something, and I've certainly learnt plenty this morning through this briefing. And I hope that you can go away with the knowledge that I certainly see it amongst this committee, that you have our full support. Certainly with your recommendation, and we will continue to lobby the Minister on your behalf. And also, just to let you know, we have the IFA in next week to brief us as well, so no doubt there'll be some questions that will be fired at them after this briefing today, so it was good to have you in first to do that briefing. So look, thank you very much for your time, and no doubt we'll be speaking to you again in the not too distant future. Thank you. Thank you now. Okay. All right, members, we're going to just take a quick break while we set up for our next briefing, okay?
Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29.
Okay, members, welcome back in again. And just before I move on to item 6, I realised that the committee didn't make some recommendations there at the end of item 5. So there's 3 members, Fra, Robin and Andy, that want to make those recommendations. Fra, do you want to go first with what you had said?
No, sure. I think it's important that quite often the level of organisations that play any sport, when it gets to that level, that the finance available doesn't trickle down that far, and even further down the roots football. And I think we need to raise the question with whoever to make them aware that there is a real serious crisis looming in that level of football.
Okay, thank you for that, Frat. And before I move to Robin and then Andy, can I just say to the members on Starly, if we can hear your papers rustling, can you press, I don't know why, because normally you're silenced until you're brought in, but for whatever reason.
Me, I'm singing and us on papers.
She's very,
I'm not used to being up early.
I know you're
she's
not.
very
That's okay. And Robin, I'll go to you.
No, I think, Chair, as I said during the meeting, I think we all would want to be supportive of their application. I think the Minister indicated she was supportive of sport in general. I think as we would lobby the Minister on this issue, I think we should also lobby the Finance Minister, and maybe you, Chair, on behalf of the committee could write to both the Minister and indeed the Finance Minister.
and the IFA.
And the IFA.
I'll throw in that also.
Okay, thank you. And then Andy, you wanted to make a point as well.
Yeah, Chair, just obviously apologies, I had them about towards the end of the briefing, but what struck me was the cross-cutting nature of what was presented to ourselves, you know, the hospitality aspect. So perhaps I would suggest to go one further in what Robin's saying and give the entire executive side of our letter encouraging support for the wider football sector, because there is that cross-cutting nature to it all.
Presentation.
The presentation and any letter that we do.
Okay, thank you. Members, although members all agreed then with those actions, yes? Okay, that's good. And then also, before I move on to item number 6, I received an apology there through from Johnny. Something urgent has come up in through his constituency office, so he hopes to join us at some stage, but if we can just get him logged in as an apology. All right then, we're going to now move on to agenda item number 6, which is Retail NI briefing on the future of our town centres post-COVID-19. You'll find that briefing at page 29, and we have with us today in person, which is great, Glenn Roberts, who's the Chief Executive of Retail NI. Glenn, can I hand over to you?
Well, thank you very much, Chair. It's actually great to be here in person, and just by way, I suppose, for your own information, considering that you're looking at the liquor licensing bill, we have submitted some ideas and suggestions about possible amendments to that legislation. Perhaps if I can, before I sort of touch upon the broader picture of our high streets, both in terms of where we are with COVID now and post-COVID, perhaps if I can maybe just touch upon the impact of the new restrictions that have been announced in the last few days. And I think that obviously while retail is largely allowed to remain open, we are obviously concerned about the impact of the closure of the hospitality sector, because there's a symbiotic relationship between retail and hospitality where, if you like, the twin pillars of our high streets and our town centres, and you cannot do town centres without hospitality. So it will result in a very significant amount of reduction in terms of footfall for our members, and we work in very close partnership with our friends in the hospitality sector, and quite frankly it is heartbreaking to hear the stories that I'm sure you've all heard through your constituencies about those businesses that have to close tomorrow. We very much welcome the very fact that retail was allowed to open. Our members have spent somewhere in the region of £7 million making sure their stores are fit for purpose, they're safe both for customers and for their staff. Indeed, that was outlined by the Chief Medical Officer, who estimated that 5% of transmission cases come from retail. So shop owners and shop staff have worked incredibly hard, and I think maybe if I can, maybe a special shout out to the hard-working retail workers that have been working throughout this pandemic, particularly on the food side, and many small independent retailers, making sure that vulnerable communities have food and other important products. And obviously that will be the continuing through this next 4 weeks as well. I think that for today is important because we will hear from the executive about what support they're going to give to business. And I think it's important to point out that, yes, while I think obviously hospitality is front and centre in terms of getting that support, we also need to look at those businesses that are not legally required to close, but in practical terms will be forced to close because they've lost footfall, they've lost trade. And that covers retail, manufacturing and many other significant businesses throughout the supply chain. At present, what was outlined by the Chancellor does not cover those businesses because legally they're not required to close, but on all practical purposes, if they lose their customer base, trade, footfall, they will have to close. And I think I've just outlined, obviously, that symbiotic link between hospitality and retail, particularly many independent retailers. So I think that we will be sort of looking to see what support is unveiled by the Executive in relation to those businesses as well. And perhaps if I can turn to where we are now and where we need to be, and maybe try and identify what does in the short-term success look like for our high streets. I mean, we've been very clear throughout this that we are no longer facing a high streets crisis. We're in fact facing a high streets emergency. And that is why we have obviously strongly lobbied the Executive to establish a high streets task force. Now, that was a demand before this pandemic because there needed to be a coordinated approach to high streets and town centres, and the department that you scrutinise has a key role in that with its regeneration powers and setting the strategic policy direction for our town centres. But I have to say it is frustrating that this High Street Task Force was announced on 7th of August, and as we sit here approaching the end of October, it still has not met. We still have not known its membership, and as you'll see by your what submission that we put forward to you today, we've outlined the model that we see this High Street Task Force looking like, and essentially comprising communities, infrastructure, economy, finance, DERA, and relevant business groups coming together to identify certainly what needs to be done in the short term to repurpose and reimagine our town centres and high streets with COVID, and that is obviously an immediate concern as we approach Christmas, but also the long term, because we're all aware that the high street and the retail sector is going through a profound period of change. In fact, it's changing now at a faster pace in the last year than it has in the last 30 years, and COVID has accelerated that change. And now all of that change is for the better, and we've seen the likes of Easton's and many other big names that have sadly closed. And we haven't even got to the point where the furlough finishes or the impact of this 4-week restriction period as well, the impact that will have on jobs. And I would certainly say that the very conservative figure of 100,000 people unemployed by Christmas is a very conservative figure. We would certainly see that, and our own estimations being way beyond that figure of 100,000. In fact, it could even be double. And those are businesses that are literally hanging by a thread. And there's no doubt that this 4-week period will push those businesses over the line. And that's not just hospitality, that's retail. And all of those businesses across the supply chain, because I think we've focused in recent days about the numbers of restaurants and bars that are closing, but we shouldn't also forget the impact that it has on their supply chain. And many in that supply chain are local businesses, small manufacturers and producers who are equally pushed to the edge as well. But I think that very much for our part, we see the Executive, and it's good the Executive is now beginning to focus on its programme for government again. But central part of what we are putting forward is this concept of localism. And I think that what we define localism is not just about supporting independent retailers, important that it is. It's actually about changing the leadership model in local communities and making sure that they have the power to affect change in their towns, in their cities and on their high streets. So it is about changing that leadership model and ensuring that those communities are empowered. And I think one early action point for the Communities Department and the Executive as a whole is to devolve regeneration powers to the councils. And I've seen this in first hand after the Primark fire, the reconstruction efforts, how Belfast City Council probably could have moved a lot faster had they had the regeneration powers. Now, that's not in any way taking away the good work that the officials in the Department of Communities do in terms of regeneration. They do a good job. but it would be so much easier if our 11 councils, and they, I think, in many respects need to have skin in the game in terms of the recovery process with COVID. If they were able to have those powers, I think we could see faster decisions, we could see change and more responsive to the needs of our high streets. And I think that would be certainly one early action point that the executive could do. And I think many of the councils are working incredibly hard to respond to this crisis. So I think that is certainly an early action point. I think other trends that we're seeing are, and this has a direct impact on Belfast City Centre, and this was something that I think you all recall our Independence Day and our awards that we did supporting independent retailers over the summer. I think when we analysed the votes of that campaign, it showed that in all intensive purposes, shopping and socialising is very much now a local phenomenon. So what that means in practical terms, that many of the surrounding towns in and around the Greater Belfast area have actually made a degree of a comeback where that trade is staying local. And I think it's because so many office workers in Belfast City Centre have been, obviously, are remote working and working from home, and that trade is staying essentially local. That has a clear impact on Belfast City Centre, and obviously that problem for Belfast City Centre is only going to get worse with, obviously, the hospitality sector closing as well. And it's actually, in many respects, it's not just, that's an interesting phenomenon because we've picked up increased trade in places like Belmont Road, Ballyhackamore, Antrim Road, Ormer Road, in Andytown Road as well, where many people have stopped going into the city centre and really stayed local. Now, maybe that is in the short term a positive thing, and maybe does give those towns who were struggling before COVID a little bit of further support. But we can't have a situation where our city centre, Belfast City Centre, is an economic driver for the whole region. And if it goes into long-term decline, then we have a major problem to deal with. And I think that whilst, as we speak, and in the short term, it is not practical to get many of those office workers back, we do need to have begin some thought about what a strategy would look like to bring those office workers back, because they are a huge amount of, or generate a huge amount of footfall of trade for retail and indeed hospitality as well. So whilst it's not practical as we speak at this time to have but I think the executive need to give some thought what that would look like. And I think that what we've said in terms of our future high streets, it is about repurposing, reimagining them, and it will be a very different landscape post-COVID. And I think we've seen many local retailers stretch themselves and indeed retrofit in their stores to cope with COVID and making sure that their customers and their staff are safe. But I think what we do need to move away from or begin to focus on is what does the recovery look like? What does success look like? Because there is a new paradigm there now in terms of business and the economy. The world has changed. There is an opportunity for a reset, and maybe there are some positives in that. And in many crises bring out the best in people, and it also brings out the best of innovation. And I think many independent retailers have stepped up to the plate in that regard. But I do believe that whilst the High Streets Task Force and the department that you scrutinise has a key role to play in that, this High Street Task Force is not an end in itself. It is very much a means to an end. And it is vital that this task force look at what are the immediate things that need to be done on our high streets, because whilst we've seen all the good work that's done in store, we still have some way to go to ensure that our high streets, our town centres, are fully safe for shoppers and consumers, particularly obviously as we go into Christmas. Now, many local chambers of commerce in many of those towns have stepped up working with councils, so they haven't waited on the executive to act, they have stepped up. And it's important that we provide full reassurance that our town centres, our high streets are safe for consumers, for shoppers to return to. And that's the external environment. So it is about making sure that those town centres, they're changed in terms of signposting. It may be in some areas further pedestrianisation. It will be stewarding. It will be public sanitising stations, which I know is under consideration with Belfast City Council. It's all of those things, and that requires a joined-up effort. And if we are to bounce back from this crisis, it is that sort of partnership between key departments such as communities, infrastructure, finance, economy, DAERA, and indeed the sector as a whole. And one of the things that in the model that we have put forward to the DEO in terms of this task force, we have said that key business groups need to be a key part of this group, not just shunted off to some advisory function and told afterward what they're doing. You know, we have a much part, and the members that I represent have a key role, and as a key stakeholder, they need to provide and play a full role in this. And you know, that brings in a wider issue. The new programme for government, you know, business, trade unions, the voluntary sector, we just don't need to be seen to be or treated as consultees. We need to be treated as partners in all of this. So a new programme for government, and whatever this High Street Task Force does whenever it meets, it has to be a proper partnership, but it also has to ensure that it delivers. It can't be something that ministers stand up and said, look, High Street Task Force, we've got this. It has to really deliver. So that means getting things like car parking, public transport, investment in infrastructure in our rural towns. It means getting business rates. And we shouldn't forget, whilst there's a business rates holiday at the minute, it's been kicked into touch. And I think that was a good initiative by the Finance Minister. But, you know, March and April are coming very soon. And again, we need to consider a completely reformed system of business rates. But I do think that there are some practical things, as I said in conclusion at the start. And I think giving the councils the regeneration powers, I don't see any good practical reason why that should not be the case and made a priority. And that is something that I'm very sure all of the local councils want to see. So I'm very happy to take any questions, Chair, and what we've put forward. But I would say that I think we can get through this. And I think one thing that I would say that in terms of the messaging of the executive, you need to give business community, you need to give consumers hope that we can get through this. And, you know, but the members that I represent are very committed to playing their full role in ensuring we get to the other side of this. And as much as I hate to paraphrase the Prime Minister, you know, build back better is where we're at.
Okay, Glenn, thank you. Thank you very much for that. I want to put on record as well, you know, just the wonderful job many of our independent retailers and small retailers have done during since March. I have found myself exactly that person that no longer goes to the large supermarket, but is using my local now. You know, whether that's the Diamond in Rathcoole or Abbott's Cross or wherever that are close by where I live, because of I find them safer. So I did for a start, because they were only allowing so many people in, and they're still doing that. Actually, the independent retailer and the smaller retailer are still, in my opinion, as someone who is a shopper, are still the safest places to go and shop in that I feel, absolutely. And I think they've done a wonderful job. You know, I know even some of the local independents in and around the area I represent that were doing deliveries for people that were unable to get out, you know, where they could phone an order in for older people. So they really did step up to the mark during the height of the pandemic. And I absolutely get where you're coming from when it comes to, especially as I see, especially Belfast city centre. I mean, any time I would ever have been into Belfast city centre, maybe being with my daughter or whoever, it was always lunch was part of that, or tea was part of that. You know, so that's maybe a part of the culture that we have, that the two do go very much hand in hand, and I do fear for the lockdown of our bars and restaurants and the impact that will have. We know that when Ballymena had to tighten up their regulations, it hit their town centres greatly. So absolutely aware of that. And I suppose I worry on the run up to Christmas as well. You know, a lot of people traditionally maybe only go to Belfast twice a year from in and around Northern Ireland, but they certainly go whenever it's coming up to Christmas. Is seen as a day out nearly, where time is spent in Belfast, lunch or tea is included in that, everything, and it's a full day out, and it's a social occasion nearly. So I think that we need to be very mindful of that as an assembly as well going forward, the impact that will have on the Christmas spend in the city centres. And certainly, again, I know as someone who has a constituency office in the middle of a town centre, and it already was under severe pressure prior to COVID, but that pressure now has just tenfold into keeping that. So I do agree. I think councils very much regeneration and the powers should lie with councils. I think they're in the perfect position they're already doing so much of the work as councils already. So I think that absolutely is. But I have a concern around this task force. I mean, you said it was set up on the 7th of August. Do we even know which department are going to take responsibility for it, Glenda's yet?
Well, it was announced on the 7th of August. It's been led by the TEO. And I think it's right that it is led by the TEO because obviously, by its very nature, it's right across at least 5 or 6 different departments. So in the paper that we've submitted to your committee, we've suggested a possible model. Now, I think the executive, they've met the chair of the English High Streets Task Force, and indeed that was I met with them, and I think the English High Street Task Force is doing some good work. I think because it's taking a very solution-based approach to this, and there's good models and good work that has been done by, I think, councils right across the UK in relation to adapting their town centres to the new normal. So I do think that it is important TEO take the lead in this, and we've identified that perhaps the 2 junior ministers in the TEO could act as the co-chairs of that. But I think we need to see this meet now and start the work. And I think there's an immediate job of work this side of Christmas, because I do think, as I've said, retailers are working very hard to make sure their in-store is safe as possible. But I think there is a bit more work and coordinated approach that's needed in terms of the external settings within our high streets and our town centres. And that requires, obviously, a number of departments working together. But I think drill it all down, it is actually about ensuring that we send a clear message to shoppers this side of Christmas that our high streets, our town centres are safe for them and their families to visit. And I was heartened by the very, very low transmission rates in terms of retail, and that's a testament to the hard work our members are doing. And I think maybe there's been almost a fixation there about face covers, and don't get me wrong, that is crucially important that shoppers do that. But we're slightly worried that it's almost become a silver bullet. And we're seeing increasing reports where shoppers are wearing face covers, but then they're not social distancing or hand sanitising. So it's important. And we put a direct reminder out to consumers on social media as a reminder to that. But it's also a testament to the hard work that our retailers have been doing to encourage and educate consumers of the important message.
And that's why I said, in my personal opinion, I feel safer in an independent retailer and a smaller retailer than I do in any of our large, because I absolutely agree with you. You're running the gauntlet many times going into supermarkets or wherever else, because people seem to think that this piece of cotton or piece of paper across their face will allow them to go within breathing distance almost of other people. And I think that job of work that retailers have had to do has been extremely difficult for them around the whole issue of face coverings, and even for themselves as staff wearing face coverings as well. So I suppose, and it's maybe not so much to do with this committee as such, but I just would be interested if maybe just go into a bit more detail around that, about how they have the issues that they're facing around that, and the non-compliance as well. It is out there, there's no doubt about it. We certainly see it, and just the pressures that puts the retailers under.
Well, I think firstly, maybe if I can, I think we're a bit frustrated that a week ago the TEO announced that shop staff would be required to wear face covers, and we have absolutely no problem with that. But a week has passed, we don't know the detail of that regulation or the commencement date. And that is a week ago, so my office has been inundated by retailers calling, asking, what's the detail of the face cover regulation for staff? When is the commencement date? And this was announced a week ago, and we have pushed the TEO repeatedly on this. Tell us the commencement date, tell us the detail of the regulation. You know, if we're to play a role in implementation and enforcement, and play our full role, which our members want to and have done, tell us the detail of the regulation. That hasn't stopped us. Obviously, you're seeing a lot of our members' staff wear face covers. They've been doing that for some time anyway. But I do think that in matters like this, the executive need to tell us the detail if they expect us, expect our members to play their role in this. I think in terms of the face cover issue, we've been very concerned about this sort of added pressure put on shop staff. I mean, we work very closely with the Shop Workers Union Osdor. They surveyed their members, and they've shown that since the start of the pandemic, shop workers have double the amount of physical and verbal abuse for reminding customers about face covers. I was very struck that in their survey, I think 42% of that abuse was where shop workers reminded customers about face covers, and over 60-odd% was about reminding them about social distancing. So I'm very conscious that shop workers who have played an invaluable role, and let's not forget, in March and April and May, at the height of the pandemic, they were there making sure that people, particularly in vulnerable communities, had food and other important products, and they were, those shop staff were putting their own health at risk, and indeed their families, to make sure that people got food and other important products. So we owe a huge debt of gratitude to those retail workers who have played an invaluable role. There are so many heroes in this pandemic, and I think that obviously on that list of heroes has to be shop workers. So they are playing a role. So that's why we're saying, look, because of that, you should not have a situation where an 18 or 19-year-old shop worker has to confront 2 or 3 guys at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night in a retailer in a housing estate and remind them about face covers. I think it's unfair to put shop staff into that difficult position. But, that's not to say that retailers don't have a role and continue to play that role. But we are very, very conscious about the growing levels of abuse of shop staff. And you know what? That should be a zero tolerance approach. And indeed, we fully support Osdor in terms of their campaign at Westminster to make sure that if a shop staff member is physically abused, then the person found guilty of that physical abuse should have a very significant sentence. And I think we need to have a zero tolerance approach to physical and indeed verbal abuse of shop staff.
I agree 100%, and people wonder why we're in the position we're in right now, and it has been that lack of personal responsibility, and I absolutely get it. I'm going to open the meeting up, and I've got Fra, Sinead, and then Kelly. So, Fra.
Glenn, thanks for the presentation. Obviously, you're very, very welcome this morning, and I think, like Paula and yourself, we have to commend the people who run retail, especially local shop owners and workers, and the work that they have done throughout the whole pandemic, and we continue to do that. I do think that we also have to work to ensure that shops are a safe place to go to, not only in wearing masks, but also in the protection of the people behind the counter. But we should also make sure that we don't send a message out that masks are not the be all or end all. They're part of a number of factors that if we're all followed, they have an important. They're an important element of what we're trying to do to deal with that. I agree with you totally. I live close to Belfast city centre, and would always call myself as in another city, being the city centre quite regularly, and it's quite surprising, how difficult, how much it has fallen away, and quite a lot of people are frightened to go in, especially of a certain age group who would have been in the city centre East End. I think we all have a responsibility to try and ensure that people understand and realise that going into the city centre is a safe way to shop and a safe place to go. I think that probably one of the big impacts, and I would like obviously that advises in this has been the big increase in online shopping and the impact that has had on many local shops. Especially you see people on their mobiles, on their computers, and the first you ask what they're doing in their online shopping. And the thing, where in the past they'd have been in some of the smaller and bigger shops that keeps not only economy alive, but makes it vibrant. It's actually interesting, you know, in the past and long before this, and I think you had said before, it's how we moved the position that shopping for people is not just about going into a shop and buying something, but there's a full circle, or as Paul has talked about, that's shopping, going in to enjoy whatever else is on offer throughout the city. And I think that has to be a part of any package that when we come out the other end of this. You know, you see in the likes of Belfast, some of the events that have taken place in the likes of cultural days or nights, you know, where tens of thousands of people came in, and there was obviously great benefits to the local shops and all the rest of the entertainment places within the city. And any strategy needs to build itself around that also. And I know that some of the people that I would talk to who have premises within thing do fear that they could go out of business. But again, it all boils down to, when we're looking at it, it's how we protect life in terms of this here, and how we do that along with ensuring that the what's on offer in the city centre also is pushed to the limits.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, strip away all the jargon. It is about making sure our high streets are fun, family-friendly experience, and the word experience is where it's at, and that's why the loss or the closure of hospitality will have such a huge impact on high street, because that's what the 21st century high streets are about, making them fun, family-friendly experiences, the destinations that people want to go back time and time again. And, you know, if we don't have Biddles or we don't have all those amazing bars, I know that you're rumoured to be in now and again, we limit the offer that is there in our town and city centres. Your point about online is well made, and obviously Invest and I have been, they've produced their own sort of digital grant for, now it's a low take-up because I think some of the qualifying criteria was very restrictive. For instance, independent retailers had to have 10 employees and above. That's not a typical independent retailer. But, you know, obviously I hope that fund will, and it's only a very low take-up, but I understand that the Economy Minister is making changes to that to make sure that independent retailers, if they can't sell online, they can certainly market online. And, you know, a lot of our members have dramatically increased the amount of online sales, but also, facilitating online deliveries as well for many older people, many people who have been shielding. And, you know, we will see huge pressures there because in terms of obviously the high numbers of people testing positive, but equally the higher numbers of people having to self-isolate, that's going to put a further pressure in terms of home deliveries. But it's also as well on the retail side, many independent retailers are struggling with staff absences. And some of those staff absences are not just positive cases or self-isolating. Stress as well is becoming a major, and this is something that I had a very good discussion with the new mental health champion earlier in the week about the mental health aspects of this. You know, we have had a mental health epidemic before this crisis. We certainly have one the other side of it, and goodness knows where we'll end up with that. But ultimately, it gets back to the future lies in creating that experience. And I have no doubt that if you look at Belfast, there's no doubt that we could with the right partnership, the right investment, the right policy agenda, there's no reason why Belfast could not be in the future in the top 10 retail destinations of the UK and Ireland.
Sure, just one point, and I think that you mentioned the whole question of mental health. We all realise and understand that this virus has a serious impact and around people's mental health. In terms of the task force, has there been space set aside for somebody there that would also come in and to stress the importance? Because like everything else, we all know that people enjoy shopping because not only they get the product that they want, but not only the day out, but it also impacts on good mental health.
That's a fair point. I mean, there's a growing list of things this new task force needs to be doing. I think that I'm quite keen to look at this whole mental health issue because I think in many respects, I think the new programme for government has to have at its centre the whole well-being agenda, and I think addressing the mental health issue has to be almost a key economic indicator now. So the mental health of our population, of our employees, has to be a key economic indicator. And I desperately worry about the off-the-scale numbers of mental health problems that this society will face, and not least, as I've said, the impact on shop workers, but the people who have lost their jobs, the business owners that are closing tomorrow at 6 o'clock. And we are storing up so many problems in the future, and it worries me greatly. And I know the stress levels of business owners themselves to try and since March, and use all constituency MLAs have equally heard those terrible stories and the pressure and stress that business under. So I do think that was a good appointment in terms of creating a mental health champion. I think, and we want to look at ensuring how we as a retail sector can support that agenda, both in terms of policy, but also in terms of assisting our members and their staff.
Okay, thanks, Fra. Sinead?
Thank you, Chair. And I'm not sure what Glenn was talking about there, because Fra's still got his pioneer pen. I don't think he does be in Bettles at all.
Nobody said he was drinking.
True.
I take it off every Saturday.
No, thanks very much, Glenn. Thanks for coming in today. I think you hit the nail on the head there when you said, it's not fair for staff in shops to be, to have to be taking on the responsibility of making sure shoppers and the public are wearing their masks. That's a responsibility for us all, and I don't underestimate the pressure that our retail staff are under at this time. Certainly I know any of the shops I've been in here locally, I've always felt very safe in and around Southdown. I think it's just, I want to pick up on the point firstly about the supply chain that you mentioned at the start, and it's something I brought up with the First Minister yesterday, because we know that today they're discussing, the executives discussing a range of financial measures to help businesses that have been asked to close. But of course, we have businesses down the supply chain that will be impacted. So I hope certainly that the supply chain and those that rely on businesses further up will be taken into consideration in those discussions. Getting back to your point about, and I certainly don't want to be quoting Boris Johnson either, but that notion of building back better, and I think there is an opportunity in terms of our town centres and our city centres to maybe try something different. And my angle here would be in terms of pedestrianisation of streets. And I'm wondering, is that something that the High Street Task Force will be actively looking at whenever they start their discussions? Because I think we've seen it work well in other European cities and other cities across the world. There are opportunities for it to happen in Belfast. I I think Donegal Square West maybe is a possibility. Certainly in Warrenpoint, here with me locally, our own square in Warrenpoint, streets in Newry I can think of as well that would probably benefit from it. So I'm just wondering, is it something that the task force will be looking at? And what is your own thoughts on it, and how do you think it could help to rejuvenate and boost retail post-COVID?
Well, I think that firstly, pedestrianisation, yes, it is one of the tools that can be looked at. I think we've been always very careful about stressing a general support for pedestrian as a broad concept, because it will vary from town to city. So, like for instance, there were proposals on the Ormer Road, for instance, that to effectively at weekends stop traffic and create that. Now, that caused a huge amount of potential difficulties. The traders in that area were not happy with it. But I do think we need to show imagination, creativity, in terms of almost retrofitting our town centres to adjust with the new reality where we are. And in some towns, pedestrianisation is the answer. In others, it's not. I think I'm very cautious that some of the proposals that were put forward in Belfast City Centre would effectively cut off the bus routes for many people in West Belfast, North and West Belfast. So I think we've got to be careful if we're pursuing that there. It has to be all of the key stakeholders on board. So I've no doubt that it will be looked at, and it will be a solution to some towns and cities, but not for all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sinead. Kelly?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Glyn. It's good to see you there, even though I'm remote today. But I'm very interested in the task force. We can get in contact with the Executive Office to see what's happening there and how the progress is being made on that. I'm quite keen that co-production and co-design happens, that the public would be involved. Do you see a role for the public in that task force, that there would be local consideration of what the public would like in those towns and cities across Northern Ireland?
I think, yes, absolutely. And I think that in many respects, if you look at one of the few positives that come out of the Primark fire, it was that it got people talking, not just in Belfast, but in many towns, about what type of town centre, city centre they want to see. And I think that was certainly a positive. But I think as well, it's about, when we talk about this idea of localism, it's actually about changing the leadership model in many local towns. I know the great role that many chambers of commerce, and you and I know the good role that, for instance, Ard's chamber has played. And of course, I know you're probably to remind the committee that Ard's won the best high street in terms of our awards, so I got in before you, Kelly. But if you look at that there, what happened there is that Chamber of Commerce and Ard's, they were first out of the traps in many respects in making sure their town centre was safe, welcoming for shoppers and staff. And I think they set up a very good model of how that partnership could work. So yes, I absolutely do think that it is about empowering those communities to make the changes in their own local areas. And I think one practical way that can be done is to give the councils power over regeneration. And I think that, if we've given the councils power over planning of some aspects of car parking, and economic development, but we haven't given them the power over regeneration. And I think that ties one hand behind their back in relation to affecting real change in their town and city centres. And of course, one other positive that we shouldn't lose sight of is obviously the city deals, city and growth deals. We've always been a big champion of them because we see them as the catalyst for regeneration, and there's a whole list certainly with the Belfast Region City deal to affect change in many local towns. And we've always said that, if you look at the long list of infrastructure projects, we want to see many of the infrastructure investment in our rural towns. made a priority as well, because sometimes we can get lost in those big ticket stuff, whether it's A5, A6, York Street, all of that there. And we've always said in discussions we've had with the Infrastructure Minister, we want to see our rural towns and our smaller towns, because they do feel left behind. And I think we need to ensure that they're not left behind as we build back better.
Yeah, and just when you bring up Ards, I'm sitting in the award-winning Newton Ards at the moment, but you talked there about changing leadership within sort of that town. I absolutely agree with you on the council side of things when it comes to regeneration powers. I think that those regeneration powers with a local voice included within those powers would certainly take things forward. I've noticed in particular, Glenn, that because of remote working, that many of the smaller towns and villages, not big high streets, have thrived, to be honest, throughout this pandemic, because we have a lot more people shopping and going local. As others have said here today, those local independent shops are the ones that have a big sign up on the door, and that sign says you're not coming in unless you have a face covering on or a good reason not to wear it. There's probably a difference in my local rural villages that we all know each other. So if somebody comes in without a mask on, the shop workers will know if that person has a hidden disability or a reason for not wearing a mask. But 9 times out of 10, you'll get a gulder across the aisles to say, get your mask on, and it's complied. So it is difficult for those 18-year-olds that are walking around getting shouted at because they're asking people to put on masks. But I would ask you, is there an opportunity for your members to maybe put big posters up at the doors to say to people, mask or face covering must be worn, or you need to have a good reason that you're not wearing it, otherwise you don't get in? Because I think that would help those. To be honest, let's face it, a lot of those shop workers are not on huge salaries. But I'm thinking of, again, just go back to that localism. The new ways of working. This task force has an opportunity to bring forward something new. I know you talked there about, for instance, the Ormer Road and the pedestrianisation. I'm a bit disappointed whenever owners of retail or go against that type of innovative ways of thinking. I know that Newton Ards here, we had it with our chamber. As you've mentioned, they were quite innovative themselves when they had talked about having Saturdays where there was no cars, very successful, had a lot of the traders out on market stalls and encouraging people to go into local shops. But the other things that they're looking at is later opening hours to deal with commuters coming back, dealing with remote workers, doing things that are after the school times. Is there anything that way that we can do to ensure that your members, I suppose, take the confidence that we will buy in their stores if their stores are safe for us to be in and their stores have a new way of working themselves? So it's not 9 to 5 anymore. It's about recognising the fact that there are a lot of people who won't go into shops anymore. They're terrified to do so, no matter how safe they are, because they want that remote online ordering. So what sort of work is your members, or are your members doing to develop that new way of working and to engage with their customers to consider what this new way of working might look like?
Well, just maybe if I can just take your first point about posters. Before the executive rolled out their campaign in relation to face covers, we made sure every single one of our members had a template poster. So those posters went up, and our campaign that we were doing through social media was out before the executive did theirs. We've similarly produced more material for our members, a 5-point reminder that we have, which covers 5 basic points, whether face covers, sanitising, social distancing, be kind to shop staff and support independence. So we've put that 5-point reminder out on Facebook, directly communicating. In fact, we paid for Facebook ads to reach consumers directly to ensure that they are aware of their responsibilities. And this has to be the individual responsibility of consumers and shoppers. Quite frankly, I mean, I've touched on the difficulties about shop staff enforcing this, but similarly the police can't be everywhere at once. And I mean, I think some of the points you raise, the virus is in this community, and it's only by the community coming together that we can reduce the levels of transmission. And I was just sort of reflecting there on back in March, April, and May, when we were all out clapping our NHS heroes. That was more than just a clap for NHS heroes. That was the community coming together, almost like this blitz spirit, that we're going to come together and we're going to defeat this virus. And I think we need to get back to that as a community. And I say this more from an individual, personal point of view. We need to come back and get that sort of spirit of May, April, and get that communities that were determination that we're going to see this through. I think your points about local areas, about pedestrianisation, that's why we want to see the empowerment of those local communities, local chambers, local businesses, ordinary citizens able to affect that change themselves and do what's right for their town centre. And that's what localism is all about. We've actually went further and said, look, we need to have localism and steroids. Localism isn't just about supporting independent retailers or supporting local town centres. It's about changing that leadership model. And I think our councils have a key role to play that. Local chambers of commerce, and we proactively work with local chambers of commerce. They have such an important role in affecting change in town centres and city centres, and having that sort of partnership model with councils as well. So I do think that a necessary and important step is those regeneration powers, because I definitely do think that if we're serious about that empowerment of local communities, then giving locally elected councillors a greater input into changing their local high streets, I think is a common sense step forward.
Can I just ask, Lynn, I look out my window here today, and even in award-winning yards, the number of shutters that are down is really terrifying. I'm just wondering, have you had any conversations with local councils about the percentage increase in the number of closures that have happened with retailers over the last year, and what impact that's going to have on rates for those councils?
Well, I think it's fair to say before the pandemic, Northern Ireland had the highest shop vacancy rate in the UK. In fact, nearly twice the UK. Now, goodness knows where that is now. It's off the scale. There's absolute doubt about that. And, sadly, that's going to get worse before it will get better. So that's why I think it's important that every town centre has a vacancy strategy. And I think it's asking the questions, and it's, I suppose, looking at those vacant buildings, those vacant shops, and rather than sort of seeing them as the failures of the past, look at them as the opportunities in the future. And do you know what? I mean, I've talked about town centres and high streets being experiences in retail and hospitality, but they also have to be living communities. They also have to be service providers. They also have to be places where people can mix. And I think there's a lot of new thinking in terms of this sort of retail futurology debate about the 15-minute town and city. So there's a ton of new ideas out there. Our town centres can't stand still. And rates, fixing our broken, antiquated system of business rates has to be a huge priority for this executive. We cannot go forward while having businesses pay the highest levels of business rates anywhere in the UK by a long way. You have a situation in some towns and some cities in Northern Ireland where independent retailers are actually paying more in many respects than the likes of Carnaby Street and Oxford Street in London in terms of the rates poundage. It is absolute, and I think that was why, we had consistently said that we needed a rethink, and I think it's good the Department of Finance, and this was set up before devolution returned, in terms of what a fundamental review of business rates. We hope to meet the Finance Minister very soon to see how that can be brought forward. But, we're never going to get our town centres or high streets right while we have this broken, antiquated system of business rates. Yes, it's good the Finance Minister has introduced a rates holiday, but that's going to run out very soon, and we need to think what are the next steps, both in terms of short-term COVID recovery, but also the long-term viability of our high streets.
No, you're absolutely right. And just to say, this 4-week period now, while retail is open, hospitality will be closed, and it is going to be difficult yet again for traders. And just to say that I'm sticking to their guidance at this stage because I want to be able to spend money and to be able to meet friends on the street in the run-up to Christmas. But thank you very much, Glenn.
Okay, thank you. Kelly, Robin, Did you have a question
Uh,
or comment?
Not so much, Chair, and many of the points of sane and sensible have been covered. I suppose really I'd be interested to know a little bit about the work being done in England, and maybe, Chair, through you, if Wayne has a paper that could be supplied, I think that would be.
I was going to suggest that we maybe get a research briefing on other best practice as well. So, but if you have any information.
Well, I do think it might be useful in that effect. Obviously, the chair of the High Streets Task Force was over. He met with the First Minister and I think one of the junior ministers in the TEO. I think that was good that he did that. And I think he's. But what I would say, it would be useful maybe, and I'm happy to give this to your clerk to ask him to make a presentation, because I think. And this is something that we've actually raised even before COVID, because there's lots of good practice, like for instance in the Northern Powerhouse, about how some of the councils have got sort of devolution deals, how they've used new powers, particularly in the north of England. So I think there's lots of good projects there, good practice, and good models of partnership that we could learn of. Equalise as well. I think there's some good work being done in Dublin City Centre as well. Very conscious of what their bid is doing in Dublin City Centre. So there's models of good practice, but I think certainly, it's not for me to speak for the chair of the English High Streets Task Force, but I'm fairly certain that he would be open to a presentation. Okay,
Chair, can I just, like you, disappointed that the executive haven't taken the matter forward. Have to say that. You've told us who you think might be on from your side, from the executive side in terms of which departments. Who would be on this task force from your side?
Well, obviously, I think key organisations in retail and hospitality. I mean, it's not for us to maybe, that may well be a call for the TO to decide, but I think certainly business organisations that have taken a hands-on role in town centres and high streets. And so, I don't want to maybe give a prospective list, because I'd probably get it in the ear of people saying who think they should be on it. But I think what I would say is that, those organisations from business need to be full players on it, not hived off in some advisory or touchstone group that occasionally meets. They need to be key players, and they have as much responsibility for delivery as those government departments. And that's maybe a new way of working. I think this task force will be slightly different than the English one. The English one is very much a lot of place management, bid managers, and it does some good work. But obviously it covers England. England is a big country. Here we are a small region, so I think we can get that partnership model right. And I think we've got some good work being done by our business improvement districts as well in many parts of Northern Ireland. So I think it's about ensuring we get that collective push, and there are KPIs for our members just as they are for those government departments. But I repeat again, it has to be. We need it set up. I don't think it's rocket science who needs to be on it. It needs to hit the ground running, and I think it's not be seen as an end in itself, but as a means to an end. And quite frankly, 7th of August this was announced. We hosted the First and Deputy First Ministers in walkabouts in town centres. We pushed and strongly lobbied for it, but I'm slightly frustrated that as we sit here, we still don't know who's on it. It hasn't met. And by now, it should have been established. It should have had a work plan and start. And I think where we need to be in terms of, we're very much focused on the problem of COVID and the impact that that is having on our economy and our high streets. What we now need to focus on, what are the solutions? What are the recovery plan that we need to put in place? And that's where we need to move this whole process forward. Start talking about solutions and not problems. And I think that's where we need to be at, because we need to give the business community and the wider community hope. And I think if there is a plan, a recovery plan that all of us can buy into, I think that's going to boost morale and get a sense of a real sense of determination and that that we're fighting back.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And if Given can deliver through you, I would have thought that would be a worthwhile exercise for the.
Yeah, no, I agree. Thank you, Robin. Mark?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that, Glenn. We knew of the plethora of problems facing our town and city centres and the traders therein already or prior to the pandemic, and what has happened over the past number of months has certainly exacerbated that tenfold, at least, I would say, in most cases. Most of the points I was going to make have been made at this stage, Chair. If anyone didn't ask them, Glenn included them in the answer anyway. There was a wee supplementary, though, and it was in terms of the Invest NI, the online training grant that you were chatting about there, Glenn, and you had said that the economy was minded to look at it or tweak it because of the criteria that was pretty prohibitive to many of the small traders. I was wondering, was there scope there maybe for collaboration among and between traders in specific geographical areas so that they could have almost like a shared online shopping platform?
Yeah, Mark, there's a whole host of different ideas. I mean, just as we talk about the high street, we also need to talk about the digital high street. And the rule of thumb for any retailer, whether the smallest independent to the largest multiple, they need a strong online presence. And if they can't sell online, they can certainly market online. And that's why we're so keen for this fund to be established, particularly to help independent retailers cope with this new normal now. I think some of the criteria was quite restrictive. And I think that, whether this could be done in, say, a collective thing, for instance, working, with a bid area, or working with, for instance, where you are in Derry with CCI. The model will vary from town to town, but I do think having a strong Chamber of Commerce working on these things locally on the ground is a good thing. But there's lots of new models, and we're getting a lot of contact from new, if you like, tech businesses that are bringing some really good new ideas out there in terms of increasing the digital footprint for independent retail. But there's also, I think, another challenge as well. I sit on the new skills advisory group in the Department of the Economy, and one of the work streams there is the whole digital literacy side of things. So we need to increase the skill set of many independent retailers so that they can obviously utilise this grant, but also have the skills to do it and bring it forward. So there is a challenge there, and I think it's good that the Department of Economy have set up this new skills group, and one of the work streams they're looking at is that whole digital skill set, sir. So I am encouraged that there's progress being made on that.
I think so much should be done for the digital skill set of MLAs as well. If you'd seen us struggle with this Starleaf and Zoom and that over the past couple of months, Glenn. But certainly I would think there'd be huge merit in that kind of collective approach as well. Where if businesses, small local businesses can come together, it's sort of like the Irish saying, "Nín yard go cur the céile," and have one website rather than 4 or 5 or 6 or 7. It's making it more convenient for the shopper, and nothing's going to replicate that shopping experience. But it was Fra made the point, you might go out to get something in one shop, but then you'll go in here, there, and everywhere else. So if they were all on the same site, I think that would be very, very handy. When you look at the big boys that they're up against, your Amazons and that, where it's just so bloody convenient, for people can get anything on there. I think it's important to maximise the choice that people have, and that will maximise the opportunities for the local businesses. I feel the other issue, I suppose I should just put in record my appreciation for the local businesses that have worked so hard and kept our cities and towns vibrant through, well, they were the worst of times. I don't know if they'll still be the worst of times after this has passed us. But I have a great deal of sympathy for those businesses and retail among them, of course, who they're not being made to close. but it's been made pretty difficult for them to stay open because the footfall in the towns and cities has just gone. Now, I don't know if you could look at sort of examples in other jurisdictions, maybe what support have been given to businesses like that to help them survive and stay open? And is there anything that you think that we could and should, or the executive could and should be doing more in that regard?
Well, I think we wait to hear what the executive decide today in terms of the business support package. I think it does have to take in those businesses that are not legally required to close, but in effective terms are forced to close. And, you know, we've picked up, obviously, you've asked about other examples. I think certainly we've been monitoring the situation very closely in your constituency in terms of the measures that have been introduced in Derry and Strabane. And certainly, you know, we have found that obviously there's restrictions on hospitality already there. But, you know, again, that has reinforced this lack of footfall, the secondary impacts, if I can call it, of those restrictions. And I think that is whatever the executive decide today, they cannot ignore the huge numbers of retail and supply chain businesses that will, quite frankly, go under and not benefit from what is an offer from the Chancellor in terms of the JSS. The furlough scheme is working out. And that's why that, you know, ourselves and a number of other business groups have come together to express concern about a second lockdown, because in March and April we had the small business grants, we had obviously a very generous rates holiday, we had the furlough scheme. We have virtually none of that now. I mean, if you like, the rate stuff, that credit card has been maxed. There are no more small business grants, and the furlough scheme is going in a matter of days. And we have a JSS scheme which is only there for legally required businesses that are closing, or businesses are legally required to close. So there are huge gaps up there, and the executive, I think, and I'm pleased that the Finance Minister has said that he gets that. So we wait to hear the outcome of the executive today. But, you know, it is greatly worrying, and I do worry that there are a number of retailers, small retailers in city centres, in particular in Belfast city centre, who realise that there's no office workers there to speak. 5% of office workers are back. I think that may even reduce further. Hospitality would close. So where is their footfall? And I think that greatly worries me and will make a bad situation even worse if the right business support package, that business support needs to be there to support those businesses.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Andy?
Thanks, Chair, and as Mark has pointed out, most of the points have been made, and thanks, Glenn, for coming in. It's good to see you in here. Obviously, our towns, city centres, villages, etc., are often described as the life and soul of a lot of our communities. And I was struck right throughout this pandemic, right back in March, right through even to the present day, and indeed in East Belfast, and I'm seeing it right across Northern Ireland, how many of our traders, retailers, and wider business sector have all come together, even despite them being massively squeezed themselves to support communities. They really stepped up to the mark, supported and rallied around amongst one another. And just one point I really want to make, and I've done quite a lot of work with a lot of the businesses in East Belfast around the COVID Recovery Revitalisation Grant. I just wanted to ask that what level of engagement you've had with councils in respect to that, what level of engagement you've had with the wider sector, how they felt that grant scheme has potentially helped them to increase footfall, and how they would like to see any further tranches of that scheme administered.
I think we've been obviously assisting members right across Northern, because each of the 11 councils are administering that fund. It varies from council to council in terms of the take-up. Certainly, in Belfast is quite a high take-up. You're seeing a real imagination, ingenuity of independent retailers rethinking how to do their stores in the light of where we are. And you know, I think there's some really good examples of that, even in East Belfast as well. So. Yeah, I think that has been it's been a good scheme, but I think, you know, I think we all need to get back that, you know, many of these independent retailers, whether they're in grocery, whether they are in pharmacy, whether they're the butchers, they're just as much a public service now as the NHS, because, you know, they're the lifeline for many vulnerable members of our community, making sure that they're there. So I think we've been, working hand in glove with a number of councils to get that message out, to encourage independent retailers to think, how can they box clever, how can they change and adapt their stores, and how can they make sure that they can potentially grow their business, but also making sure that they provide a safe environment for their staff and their customers as well.
No, absolutely, and it's important. And as I said, many of those independent retailers have gone above and beyond, and that can never be forgotten. What they've done for members of our wider community, even before this pandemic, but especially throughout the pandemic. And I'm struck by what other members have said. Obviously, they're often faced with a challenge of competing against convenience of online shopping, and again struck by the points that you make around creating that all-encompassing experience, and that experience within our towns, villages, and city centres, a fun, family-friendly experience, and that's so important. And the aspect that you had highlighted at the very beginning of your presentation, Glenn, about partnership working, and that's so important. And Kelly has pointed out, the whole co-design aspect.
Yeah,
thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, members. Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Glenn. I think certainly taken away from this briefing today, I think we have agreement, certainly amongst the committee, that we write to the Executive Office specifically around this task force, and for an update on that as to why it hasn't gone forward. And also, I think I had suggested, and Robin's suggesting there, about looking at best practice in other parts. Certainly we can then look at either a research piece or speaking to, as I said, the chair of the task force in England, as you had said. So the committee will give that commitment, that we will certainly look at that. And thank you. You're one of our first people we've had in person.
Really?
So we want to keep you here forever, Glenn.
Thank you very much. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members, are members happy enough with those recommendations from that briefing, or is there anything further they want to add to that? Are you happy enough that we go ahead with those? Kelly, you wanted to come in?
Yes, Chair, I think you're absolutely right that we need to write to the Executive Office to ask for an update about that High Streets task force. But Glenn also mentioned a vacancy strategy. It might be worthwhile, I'm assuming it would be the Department of the Economy, that we could maybe write to the Minister there to ask, is there a vacancy strategy, or is there one planned, or what discussions has there been with councils? Because we know that the councils have already made a presentation to ourselves about their dire financial situation, and any loss of rates for them is going to have a huge impact. So if we're able to deal or to find out what's happening with that vacancy rates and vacancy strategy, that might be useful too.
Okay, Robin is reminding me here that would be the Department of Finance. So it would, so yeah, we can certainly do that as well. Okay, members, anything else following on from that briefing they want to, or all agreed that we go on to our next agenda item then? Yeah, okay. We're going to then move then on to agenda item 7, which is a departmental briefing on additional legislative consent motion on the Westminster Pensions Bill. Members, you'll find your papers for this item are at page 40 of your meeting pack. And can I welcome to the meeting via Starleaf, Jerry McCann and Doreen Roy.
Hello there, everybody.
Hi, Jerry. How are you?
All the very best.
Good.
And so we will start off just with a wee sort of short statement here from Doreen. Okay, and if that suits you, okay?
Fran,
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As members know, the Westminster Pension Schemes Bill establishes collective money purchase schemes where contributions are pooled and invested to deliver an aspired benefit level. The bill strengthens protection for scheme members and enhances the powers of the pensions regulator and introduces stronger sanctions for those who willfully or recklessly harm their pension schemes, including a maximum 7-year prison sentence and a civil penalty of up to £1 million. It increases transparency about individuals' pension saving by introducing pensions dashboards and introduces provisions to help tackle pension scams. The committee were briefed on the legislative consent motion for the bill on the 12th of March and 22nd of April. The committee subsequently published a comprehensive report, and the motion was approved by the Assembly on the 1st of June. The legislative consent motion related to the bill as introduced in the House of Lords. An additional legislative consent motion is now required to cover amendments made to the bill as it progressed through the Lords, which introduced a new policy relating to climate-related financial disclosures. When we briefed the committee earlier in the year, we gave an undertaking that we would return to brief members if any policy changes were made to the bill. We are pleased to have the opportunity to speak to you today about the bill and in particular the proposed additional legislative consent motion. We have provided the committee with written briefing on the amendments to the bill and a draft legislative consent memorandum. If the committee are content, I will briefly run through the amendments to the bill.
Yes, please, Doreen.
At Lords Committee stage, an amendment covering climate-related financial disclosures introduced a new policy to the bill, which aims to secure effective governance and disclosure of the risks facing schemes, with the long-term objective of protecting members' benefits against the risks of climate change and of the risks and opportunities associated with the transition to a lower carbon economy. This amendment requires trustees and managers of prescribed occupational pension schemes to assess their climate risk management and publish information about the exposure of scheme assets to climate risk in line with the recommendations of the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. A further amendment at Lords report stage provided clarity as to the requirements which may be placed on schemes, referring more specifically to obligations under the Paris Agreement, which is an agreement within the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. These amendments aim to secure effective governance and disclosure of the climate change risk schemes face. Practically, this will allow government to mandate the recommendations of the International Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, the most widely used framework against which institutional investors report and assess exposure to the financial risk of climate change. The climate-related financial disclosures amendments cover three areas: governance requirements, publication requirements, and powers to the regulator in cases of non-compliance. The amendments also require schemes to have regard to governance guidance on complying with both effective governance requirements and publication requirements. These amendments build on regulations which are already in place that require occupational pension schemes to take account of climate change in their investment practices. Occupational pension schemes with 100 or more members are required to explain how they take account of climate change in their investment strategies. Under the regulations from this month, all schemes will be required to report publicly how they do so, as transparency is key to informed decisions and informed change. The Pensions Climate Risk Industry Group, which was convened to provide guidance for trustees of pension schemes on integrating climate-related risk assessment and management into decision-making and reporting, has highlighted that all pension schemes face climate-related risks, irrespective of the way they invest or the estimate duration of liabilities. Many schemes are also supported by employers or sponsors whose financial positions and prospects are dependent on current and future developments in relation to climate change. The effect of these amendments on private pensions policy is to strengthen the requirements placed on trustees and managers of occupational pension schemes to include proper climate risk management within their governance processes and publish that information so that it is available to all. This builds on the expectation that occupational pension schemes and other large asset owners disclose in line with the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures recommendations as set out in the 2019 Green Finance Strategy. Climate change is expected to have a significant impact on pension schemes' assets and returns for savers, both through the risks of a warmer planet and the transition to a lower carbon economy. Therefore, it is only right that long-term investors, such as trustees, are informed and empowered to take action to address these risks and protect the retirement savings of scheme members. These measures will ensure pension schemes are in a good position to play a role in the change to a sustainable, low-carbon economy. The committee were made aware of the Department for Work and Pensions consultation, taking action on climate risk, improving governance and reporting by occupational pension schemes on the 17th of September. This consultation seeks views on policy proposals to require trustees of larger occupational pension schemes and authorised schemes to have effective governance, strategy, risk management and accompanying metrics and targets for the assessment and management of climate risks and opportunities. It proposes a wide-ranging set of measures to introduce this, including calculating the carbon footprint of pension schemes and assessing how the value of the scheme's assets or liabilities would be affected by different temperature rise scenarios, including the ambitions on limiting the global average temperature rise set out in the Paris Agreement. On the 2nd of October, in a letter to the DWP Minister for Pensions, the Financial Conduct Authority outlined a framework to align its climate risk reporting requirements with those flowing from the Pension Schemes Bill. This move will ensure asset managers and Financial Conduct Authority regulated pension schemes are required to report on their assets' climate risks in line with recommendations from the internationally recognised Task Force on Climate Financial Disclosures. Since the bill was introduced, other amendments have also been made to add further detail on policies already in the bill. If members are content, I shall briefly run through these amendments. In summary, the amendments provide for a charge cap for collective defined contribution schemes. The existing charge cap set in regulations at 0.75% provides an important protection for members in the default arrangements of money purchase schemes used for automatic enrolment. This amendment ensures that the regulation-making powers in the Pensions Act, Northern Ireland 2015 regarding charge caps apply to collective defined contribution schemes, so that a similar charge cap can be implemented in these schemes. A transfer rights amendment to enable the Department for Communities to prescribe conditions that must be satisfied before scheme trustees and managers can permit an individual to exercise their statutory right to transfer their pension savings out of an unfunded public service defined benefit scheme and into another pension scheme arrangement. This amendment aims to safeguard members of unfunded public sector schemes from targeting by criminals and fraudsters. A further transfer rights amendment to clarify that, in prescribed circumstances, the trustees or managers of a scheme are not required to carry out a person's request to transfer pension benefits to a different scheme unless they are satisfied that the person concerned has obtained prescribed guidance or information on pension transfers. This is with a view to limiting pension scams. A pensions dashboard amendment to make it clear that there will be a public service pensions dashboard as well as commercial dashboards. Amendments have also been made regarding the use of delegated powers in relation to collective money purchase benefits. The delegated powers for the authorisation criteria, subordinate legislation, will be confirmatory at all usages. The delegated power for the transfer rights will also be subject to the confirmatory procedure. This is in line with the corresponding powers relating to GB legislation. An amendment has also been made to clarify an existing power allowing for the modification of statutory provision to make it clear which provisions may be amended and for which purposes. The amendments are generally seen as positive measures which optimise this opportunity to legislate for pension schemes, to better help people plan for the future and to protect people's pensions. Further detail on these provisions will be set out in subordinate legislation made by the Department for Communities and subject to Assembly control. The bill has consumer protection at its heart, and it would be advantageous for people in Northern Ireland to benefit fully from all of these policies at the same time as people in Britain. Although pensions is a devolved matter, in general, pensions policy and legislation here operate in line with corresponding pension provision in England, Scotland and Wales, in line with Section 87 of the Northern Ireland Act 1998. In addition, the Pensions Regulator, the Pensions Ombudsman and the Pensions Protection Fund all operate UK-wide. The Assembly has already agreed that the Westminster Bill should contain provision for NI. In view of this, it is sensible that the amendments should also apply here in order to ensure that what is in effect a single system of pensions can continue to function. As many schemes operating here are UK-wide schemes, it is highly desirable that the same regulatory framework is in place here within the same time frame as in Britain to facilitate compliance, planning and enforcement. The Secretary of State for Work and Pensions asked the Minister for Communities to consent to the NI provisions relating to climate-related financial disclosures remaining in the bill. Minister Hargey agreed to this and confirmed that she would bring forward a further legislative consent motion to cover the new provisions in the bill. The NI amendments I have detailed mirror those made for Britain elsewhere in the bill. Importantly, under the bill, the power to make subordinate legislation and to commence provisions relating to devolved matters will vest in the Department for Communities. Likewise, the powers of control over the subordinate legislation will vest in the Assembly. The bill ensures that the pension system is fit for the future by strengthening the system and introducing important safeguards and deterrents against those who might seek to avoid their responsibilities. Including these NI provisions in the Westminster Bill allows these important provisions to be enacted in Britain and here at the same time. This provides legal certainty for schemes and employers to allow preparatory work, for example, for the introduction of climate-related financial disclosures to proceed in tandem in Britain and NI. I can confirm that the Executive has agreed to proceed on the basis of the legislative consent memorandum. We are happy to answer any questions or clarify any issues the committee has. But just by way of a footnote, we expect that we will need to bring forward a number of technical amendments to the Assembly Pension Schemes Bill in consequence of the Westminster Bill. These mainly relate to the renumbering of certain provisions, etc. However, we will brief the committee on these during the formal committee sessions on the Assembly Bill.
Okay, that's all we have by way of our opening statement. Okay, and so we're happy to try to answer any questions that you may have.
That's great. Thank you, Doreen, and thank you, Jerry. I've no questions really on the actual bill itself, other than to welcome it, given the significant impact on pension schemes of climate change. I think it's to be welcome. I just want to ask if you're able to tell us, will there be any further LCMs be needed in respect of the Westminster Bill, or is this the final one?
As far as we know, and we don't think there will be any further LCMs. If there are any further changes to the bill, however, but we will come back and we will speak to you on them, okay, to advise you on those. But we don't think that we will need any further LCMs as such.
Right, thanks, Jerry. I have Kelly has indicated she wants to ask a question.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I absolutely welcome these policy changes, especially the climate-related financial disclosures ones. But I just wanted to ask, the legislation isn't clear whether or not there would be two dashboards or the dashboards would be amalgamated together when it comes to the public sector and the private sector dashboards. Is there anything that clarifies that for us? I'm just very aware that there are people who will have worked in both sectors, and for them to have to use two different dashboards seems difficult.
No, but how it shall work is that all of the information shall appear on each of the various dashboards. However, but there may be more than one dashboard. However, each dashboard shall have the same information on it.
Okay, I'm just thinking about customers and how they read those dashboards. Pensions are complicated enough. I'm just thinking, so that means that this legislation, the way I read it, was that there would be separate dashboards as opposed to a customer being able to go in, log in and see all of their information in one place.
No, sorry. Okay, just to clarify, I suppose each customer shall be able to see all of its information on each of the various dashboards. It's just there may be more than one. Okay, various firms might want to operate their own dashboard because that's where their members go to normally for their information, for example, to the scheme. However, but it shall have the same information as should be held on any other of such various pensions dashboards. But it's just it shall be possible for there to be more than one dashboard, but each one shall hold the same range of information.
Okay, just disappointing that there isn't a requirement for all the dashboards to collate into one. We already know that there's so many people who move around different jobs in their lifetime, and having to find where all their pensions are, it can cause a lot of heartache when a person comes to pension age. But no, thank you very much for that.
Well, just to clarify, but there will be one which will be run, I suppose, the Money and Pension Service. Okay, which is really such public sector body. Now that will be there also, but and it shall have all the information on it. But also there may be other dashboards which be run by other schemes, for example. But each one shall hold the same information.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. Okay, no other member has indicated they want to ask any questions. So can I just thank you again, Jerry and Doreen, for coming and briefing us this morning. And I think we're due to see you in the not too distant future anyway.
Yeah, I think we're up next week again.
Yeah.
After the Assembly pensions bill. So, okay, yes, we should look forward to that.
Yeah, we'll see you then next week. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, members, we're going to then move on, and can I ask you then to go to your tabled papers? There's a SL1, the Universal Credit Earned Income Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2020. The proposed rule provides a remedy to the Court of Appeal judgment where a person may have two sets of calendar monthly earnings from the same employer taken into account in the same universal credit assessment period and may lose out on the benefit of the work allowance. It also makes provision for the way information, in particular information reported to HMRC by real-time information employers, is to be used in calculating a person's earned income. Can I ask members, have they any comment? Are they content for the rule to be made? Content. Okay, all content? Good stuff, okay. Sorry, yep. See a thumbs up there. Good, thank you. I'll then move on to agenda item 8, which is SR 2020 number 217, the Employment and Support Allowance and Universal Credit Coronavirus Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2020. Members, a copy of this rule is at page 259 of your meeting packs. Can I ask members, have they any objections to this rule? Any objections, Kelly?
Sorry, Chair, it's not so much an objection, but it's just clarification on this one. Obviously, ESA, I'm just wondering when somebody can apply for this, because it's very welcome what's being proposed here, but it's going to impact so many people, especially during this period of time when schools are closed and parents may be in retail and still are key workers and still having to go to work. I just don't understand what the while it's a very good proposal or a very good SR here, I just don't know when someone can apply for it.
Okay.
Can we maybe ask that question?
Yeah, we can ask that question. It doesn't stop us making the rule. We can go ahead and make the rule, but then we can do that follow-up. Is that, if you're content with that? Yeah, okay. So are members then content that that there have no objections to this rule? Okay, thank you. Then I'll put the question that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2020-217, the Employment and Support Allowance and Universal Credit Coronavirus Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2020. Okay, members, we'll move on to agenda item 9, which is correspondence. Members, the correspondence memo is at page 267 of your meeting pack. Can I draw attention to a request from the Cliff Edge Coalition at 321 of the pack to brief the committee on welfare reform medications? And can I ask our members, would members be content to invite the group to brief at a future meeting? Yep, all content with that?
Yep.
Good stuff. Then can I also draw members' attention to a request from We Make Events at page 322 to brief the committee on the impact of COVID-19 on the arts and culture sector. And I'm sure members, lots of members received the emails from We Make Events. So can I also ask members if they're content to invite the group to brief at a future meeting also? Content? Good stuff. And then members, can I draw your attention to table paper from NIPSA in relation to jobs and services within local councils? If members are content, could we then pass this letter forward to the Minister for Communities and the Minister for Finance to make comment in relation to NIPSA? Members content with that? Yeah, okay. Can I then just ask members if they any other issues under correspondence that they want to draw attention to in committee? Are they content with the memo as drafted? Content? Yes? Okay. Yeah. We'll then move on to agenda item number 10, which is our forward work programme. Can I inform you that at the meeting next week, the 22nd of October, we will be briefed by the IFA on the impact of COVID-19 on local football, and the committee will commence its deliberations on the clauses of the pension schemes bill. Members, any comments on that or content? All content? Good stuff. Then we'll move on to agenda item number 11, which is any other business. Can I ask members if they any other relevant business? Are happy? Nope. Okay. Thank you. I'll then move on to agenda item 12, which is date, time and location of our next meeting. And our next meeting will take place here in room 29 next Thursday, the 22nd of October at 10 a.m. Thank you, members, and especially those that came in on Starleaf. Big thank you. Okay, thank you.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29.